Vanessa kissed me goodbye, her suitcase in hand, her lips warm against mine, as if she wasn't about to betray me. "I'll call you when I check in," she said sweetly, her voice light, casual, as if this were any other business trip. "It's just a boring work retreat, nothing exciting." I smiled, forcing an expression of relaxed indifference. "Have fun," I said, watching as she wheeled her expensive suitcase out the door, her heels clicking against the polished hardwood floor. The moment the front door shut behind her, I let the mask slip. My jaw tightened, my fingers flexed involuntarily. I exhaled slowly, measured. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. It was certainty. I had spent weeks, no, months, watching, waiting, collecting evidence like a silent predator. Vanessa had always been meticulous, careful, but no one is perfect. She had made mistakes, small ones, almost insignificant, but I noticed them all. The way she hesitated before answering a simple question, the odd excuses that didn't quite fit, the subtle but unmistakable way she kept her phone closer than usual, tilting the screen away from my line of sight. At first, I chalked it up to stress. Maybe work really was demanding more of her time. Maybe I was imagining things, maybe I was just being paranoid. But then came the final crack in her perfect lie. 3 nights ago, she had left her laptop open in the study, a rare slip for someone as guarded as Vanessa. As I walked past, I noticed an email on the screen, one that wasn't meant for me. My heart pounded as I read the subject line. "Can't wait to see you this weekend." The name on the sender's email was unfamiliar. Eric. My mind raced, and a cold realization settled over me like a weighted blanket. I could have confronted her right then and there. I could have exploded, demanded the truth, thrown accusations in her face, but that would have been emotional, messy. And Vanessa? She was too good at twisting words, too practiced in manipulation. No, I needed something undeniable, something final. So I waited. I played my role as the trusting husband, nodding along as she regaled me with details about her corporate retreat, smiling when she told me she'd be too busy for calls in the evenings, and the moment she left, I booked a flight. This weekend wouldn't be a business retreat for her, it would be an execution. And she had no idea. The airport was alive with its usual chaos, announcements crackling over the intercom, hurried footsteps echoing against polished floors, and the occasional wail of a delayed passenger. I walked calmly through it all, my boarding pass secure in my pocket, my carry-on slung over my shoulder. To anyone watching, I was just another businessman on a last-minute trip. No one could have guessed that I was about to turn my wife's carefully constructed illusion into a nightmare. Vanessa had been meticulous in her deception, but she had underestimated me. Her flight details had been easy enough to find. A quick glance at our shared credit card account had shown me the airline, the departure time, and even the hotel she had booked in the city. That was her first mistake, thinking I wouldn't check. Her second mistake was assuming I would never question her behavior. She had grown comfortable in her lies, emboldened by the idea that I was still the same man I had always been, predictable, trusting, oblivious. But Vanessa had forgotten something crucial. I had built my career on analyzing patterns, recognizing inconsistencies, and uncovering hidden truths. Numbers didn't lie, and neither did the subtle shifts in her routine. As I settled into my seat on the plane, I thought about the past few months, about all the small details that had led me to this moment. The first real warning sign had been the perfume. Vanessa had always been consistent in her scent, jasmine and vanilla, soft and warm. But then, one evening, she had come home smelling different. A heavier, muskier fragrance clung to her skin, one I had never smelled on her before. When I asked about it, she had laughed, waving it off as a sample from a coworker. Then there was the way she had started dressing for work. Tighter skirts, higher heels, a little more effort put into her hair and makeup. At first I had told myself she was simply taking more pride in her appearance, but when paired with the increasing number of late nights, the unexplained absences, and the hushed phone calls she took just out of my earshot, the pattern became clear. The plane took off, and I watched the city shrink below me, my mind sharpening with the cold precision of a man who had reached the point of no return. I wasn't just here to confirm what I already knew. I was here to make sure she saw it in my eyes when her world collapsed. By the time I landed, Vanessa's flight had already arrived an hour earlier. That was fine, I didn't need to rush. She wasn't expecting me, which meant I had the advantage. A short cab ride later, I was standing outside the hotel she had booked. It was a luxury high-riser. the kind that catered to executives and the wealthy. The lobby was immaculate, marble floors gleaming under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. I took a deep breath, adjusted my tie, and walked inside. The receptionist barely glanced up as I approached. "Checking in?" she asked, her fingers poised over the keyboard. "Not exactly," I said smoothly. "My wife is staying here, Vanessa Carter. I was hoping to surprise her." I gave my most practiced, easygoing smile, the kind that put people at ease. "She doesn't know I flew in, and I'd love to have a key to her room." The receptionist hesitated. "I'm sorry, sir, but I can't provide room keys to anyone who isn't listed on the reservation." "Of course, that would have been too easy." I nodded as if I had expected the answer. "I understand. Could you at least tell me if she's checked in yet?" She glanced at her screen, then back at me. "She arrived a little over an hour ago." "Perfect." I thanked her and stepped away, scanning the lobby. There was only one way into the elevators, and if Vanessa had just arrived, she would likely still be settling in, which meant I had time to prepare. I took a seat near the bar, positioning myself where I had a clear view of the entrance. My patience had brought me this far, and I wasn't about to waste it now. I ordered a drink, but I barely touched it. Instead, I watched. I waited. I let the minutes stretch, my heartbeat steady, my mind calculating the next move. Because soon Vanessa would come downstairs, and when she did, I would be waiting. The hotel lobby was alive with movement. Businessmen murmuring into Bluetooth headsets, couples laughing softly over drinks, and weary travelers dragging their luggage toward the elevators. I sat still, unnoticed in the midst of it all, my eyes trained on the sleek golden doors across the room. Vanessa was up there somewhere, likely freshening up, maybe sipping a glass of overpriced champagne, blissfully unaware that her carefully constructed lie was already crumbling. I took another slow sip of my drink, though I barely tasted it. My mind was too focused, too razor-sharp. There was no room for distractions. My plan was simple. Wait until she emerged, confirm what I already knew, and make sure she saw me at the exact moment her world fell apart. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. The anticipation twisted inside me, coiling tighter with each second. I was a man on the brink, not of rage, but of absolute certainty. There would be no confrontation, no raised voices. That wasn't my style. Vanessa had spent years believing she was the clever one, the one always a step ahead. Tonight, she would finally understand. She had never been in control. And then, at precisely 8:47 p.m., the elevator doors slid open. Vanessa stepped out, her high heels clicking against the marble floor, her figure wrapped in a dress I had never seen before. Sleek, red, daring, the kind of dress she never wore for me. The sight of it didn't hurt. It only confirmed what I had suspected all along. But I wasn't looking at the dress, I was looking at the man walking beside her. Eric, tall, broad-shouldered, with an effortless kind of charm. He was dressed in business casual perfection, his hand resting lightly at the small of Vanessa's back. A touch that was too familiar, too intimate for someone who was supposedly just a colleague. They were laughing. She tilted her head toward him, her lips curving in that slow, teasing smile I had once believed was mine alone. It wasn't, and now she would learn what it felt like to be watched. I didn't move. I didn't react. I simply let my presence exist, an unspoken force in the room. I wanted to see how long it would take before she noticed. They walked past the bar, heading toward the restaurant entrance, completely absorbed in each other. Eric said something low in her ear and she laughed. Light, effortless. But then, just as they reached the hostess stand, something changed. Vanessa's body stiffened. Slowly, as if pulled by an unseen force, her gaze drifted across the room. Her eyes skimmed over the crowd until they landed on me. And that was the moment it happened. The moment her world collapsed. Her breath caught. Her eyes widened, freezing in a mixture of shock and sheer, unfiltered panic. The color drained from her face so fast I almost thought she might faint. I tilted my head slightly, meeting her gaze with calm, unshaken precision. I saw the thoughts racing through her mind. How? Why? When? She had no answers, only the sinking realization that she had been caught. Eric, oblivious, continued speaking until he noticed she had stopped moving. He frowned, following her gaze, and then his expression shifted. Confusion, then recognition, then something else. Unease. Good. He should be uneasy. Vanessa opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I stood slowly, adjusting my jacket, my movements deliberate. I didn't need to say anything. I didn't need to cause a scene. The truth was already laid bare between us. Her hands clenched at her sides. I could see the gears turning in her head, searching for a way out, an excuse, a justification, but there wasn't one. She had run out of lies. I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. The tension in the air was suffocating, pressing down on everyone within earshot. Eric took a half step back. He wasn't an idiot. He could feel it, the undeniable weight of the moment, the understanding that whatever was happening, he was standing in the wrong place at the wrong time. Vanessa finally found her voice, though it was barely a whisper. "Marcus." I smiled. It wasn't kind. "Enjoy your work trip," I said smoothly, my voice carrying just enough edge to slice through the last remnants of her illusion. Then, without waiting for her reply, I turned and walked away. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The moment I turned away, Vanessa's world had already begun to disintegrate. The sound of my footsteps on the polished marble floor echoed in my ears, steady and controlled, each step deliberate. My pulse was calm, my mind sharp. I had spent weeks preparing for this moment, and now that it had arrived, I felt nothing but cold, quiet satisfaction. Behind me, I could hear the stunned silence stretching between Vanessa and Eric. I imagined the frantic thoughts racing through her head. Desperation, disbelief, the futile search for an escape route. But there wasn't one. She had already lost. I made my way toward the exit, nodding briefly at the bartender as I passed. His expression was unreadable, but I wondered if he had noticed what had just unfolded, if he had caught the flicker of terror in Vanessa's eyes, or the way Eric instinctively recoiled like a man who had just realized he was standing on a landmine. The air outside was crisp, a cool contrast to the warmth of the hotel lobby. I inhaled deeply, the tension in my chest finally beginning to dissipate. The game was over, the truth was out, and now Vanessa had to face it. I didn't rush. I had no reason to. My car was parked just across the street, waiting for me like an old friend. I reached into my pocket, pulled out my keys, and clicked the unlock button. The soft beep of the headlights flashing was the only sound in the quiet night. Then behind me, "Marcus, wait." I closed my eyes briefly, exhaling through my nose. I had expected this. Slowly, I turned. Vanessa stood at the entrance of the hotel, her chest rising and falling with uneven breaths. Even from a distance, I could see the panic in her eyes, the way her fingers gripped the thin strap of her purse as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Eric was nowhere to be seen. Of course he wasn't. Men like him never stayed when things got messy. Vanessa took a hesitant step forward, then another. I said nothing, watching as she moved closer, her expensive heels clicking against the pavement. "Marcus," she said again, softer this time, her voice trembling. "Please, just let me explain." I tilted my head slightly, considering her words. An explanation. As if there was anything she could say that would undo what had already been set in motion. She swallowed hard, her gaze darting to my face, searching for something. Mercy, maybe? Forgiveness? She wouldn't find either. "You shouldn't have followed me," she whispered, her voice almost accusing, as if I were the one in the wrong. I laughed softly, shaking my head. "That's where you're mistaken, Vanessa," I said, my voice dangerously even. "I didn't follow you, I was already ahead of you." She flinched, and for the first time I saw it, the dawning realization that she had never been as careful as she believed, that while she had been weaving her lies, I had been silently dismantling them, one by one. I took a step closer, just enough to watch the panic deepen in her expression. "Did you think I wouldn't notice?" I asked, my tone conversational. "Did you think I wouldn't check the credit card statements, the hotel bookings, the flights?" I shook my head, almost amused. "You were sloppy, Vanessa, overconfident." Tears welled in her eyes. "Marcus, please." "I didn't mean—" "Don't," I cut her off sharply. "Don't insult me by pretending this wasn't a choice." I gestured vaguely toward the hotel behind her. "This wasn't a mistake. This was a decision. A calculated one." Her lips parted, but she had no response, because she knew I was right. I glanced at my watch. "I have a flight to catch," I said, my voice devoid of warmth. Unlike you, I actually booked mine for a real reason. Vanessa took another shaky breath, stepping closer. Marcus, please, let's talk about this. Let's just... Talk? I interrupted, arching a brow. Like how you and Eric talk? In hotel rooms? She winced, the words hitting their mark. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally I sighed, shaking my head. You made your choice, Vanessa, I said quietly. Now you get to live with it. With that, I turned back toward my car, opening the door and sliding inside. As I pulled away, I glanced in the rearview mirror one last time. Vanessa stood frozen on the sidewalk, her arms wrapped around herself, staring after me with a look of sheer devastation. But that wasn't my problem anymore. She had built this lie, and now she could live in it. I drove for what felt like hours, though in reality it was barely 30 minutes. The night stretched on, empty, like the space between the moment I'd left Vanessa behind and the reality that now lay ahead. The air in the car was heavy, thick with the finality of everything that had transpired. I had known this moment was coming for a long time, but even so, it felt like a shift, a tectonic one. A shift that would change everything. The soft hum of the tires on the road was the only sound, filling the car as I navigated the dark streets. I didn't need to look at the clock. I already knew it was past midnight. I wasn't in a hurry. There was nothing left to rush to. There was no more waiting for the inevitable. It had already happened. At some point, I pulled into a quiet parking lot behind a small cafe, a place I had frequented in the past before everything went wrong. I had always been fond of this spot. It wasn't busy and the lighting had a soft, warm glow, perfect for a quiet moment of reflection. But tonight the cafe was closed. I sat in the car for a while, simply staring at the closed doors. Vanessa was still out there, still reeling from the shock of seeing me, still clinging to whatever story she thought she could tell. But I had already heard enough. Her explanations, her excuses, none of it mattered. She had destroyed the trust I'd given her, and there was no coming back from that. In the quiet, the weight of it all began to settle into my bones. I thought about the years we had spent together, the memories I had built with her. There had been good times, no doubt about that, but they had been poisoned by the lies, by the secret life she had woven behind my back. All those years, all those shared moments, tainted by a betrayal I couldn't have fathomed. I exhaled slowly, rubbing my temples. The hardest part wasn't that she had cheated, it was that I had trusted her completely. I had let her become a part of me, a part of my life, and in return she had taken that trust and shattered it without a second thought. I reached for my phone, pulling it from the seat beside me. A few new messages from Maria lit up the screen. I read them, one after another, her questions about the trip, about how things were going. I didn't feel like responding right away. It was too soon, too raw. But I knew I would have to explain everything eventually. The truth was, there was no way to explain this without hurting her. She had always adored her mother, they had always been so close, and now Maria would have to understand what her mother had done. I could already imagine the shock on her face, the disbelief. But the truth didn't change, no matter how much I wanted to shield her from it. I felt the pull of a familiar ache, the need to do something, to fix it, to make it all go away. But there was nothing I could do. Vanessa had made her bed, and now she had to lie in it. The reality of it was brutal, but it was the only reality left. Finally, I sent a brief message to Maria. I'll talk to you soon. I just need some time. I set the phone back on the passenger seat and leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes. For the first time in a long while, the silence was peaceful, soothing even. There was no arguing, no pleading, no desperate calls to explain myself or to justify what had happened. I didn't need to do that. There was nothing left to justify. Vanessa had crossed a line, and it was a line I couldn't and wouldn't ignore. She had chosen to betray me, to betray everything we had built together. Now, it was my turn to choose. Choose how I would walk away from this. I started the engine, the car rumbling to life beneath me. The streetlights passed by in a blur as I made my way down the road, the night feeling somehow lighter now, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. As I turned the corner, I glanced back once, toward the direction of the hotel. I knew she would be left to pick up the pieces of her own mess, to try to find a way to explain herself to the world she had so carefully crafted. But that was no longer my problem. I had taken back control, and as the city lights flickered past, I felt a strange sense of relief. The finality was here. And I was free.